Hello, friends. Good evening. It's good to have you back at It's Time to Heal. We have a very special program today, a topic that many of us avoid, a topic that we don't talk much, a topic that many times we try to avoid to go through. And so it's a pleasure for me to introduce Steve and Karen, who have a lot of expertise and who has a personal testimony also to share. Today we have a small group, but as you guys know, we record this and put it in YouTube, and so we'll be sharing it. And we know that many people we have seen from previous speakers, many people can watch it later and learn from it. So thank you, Steve and Karen, for being with us and for the work that you do. And today we are going to do something differently. Usually we do a PowerPoint presentation, but Karen suggested that we have a conversation, which I think will be good in this topic. And I would like to show, and I will show later again, that they have a book on the top of Grieving, Comfort for the Day. And so this is I've been reading it and using it, and it has been a blessing. So the topic of, so we are in summer now, probably many people traveling. We think summer, we are going to the beach, to the mountain, enjoy. But life sometimes is not as fun as that. And regardless of the time of the season of the year, we have a war in Ukraine. We have shootings in the US and losses everywhere. So sometimes our worlds are turned upside down. So I'll give you time if you guys want to share how this topic came into your life and how this ministry started.
Thank you, Gerardo. Just very, very much. Thank you so much for the
appreciate being here.
Invitation to be here, to be with the people that have been a part of your efforts to share healthy living. And we're going to share just a little bit about who we are and what we are, but then I would love to, if it's permissible, to have the others that have joined us, if they want to show themselves on screen, and we'll just have a conversation, answer your questions about your own losses. We're interested to know if you're here because you know someone who is grieving, or you yourself are grieving. Mm-hmm. So give that a little thought, and we'll ask you that again a little bit later. So Steve, don't go all the way back, but Dawson, our firstborn son, was diagnosed with leukemia, and then that leukemia went into remission?
It did. That was back in 1985. No, I actually went into remission in 1983 after he'd been diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia. And we had hoped and prayed that the remission would be something that would stay
permanent.
After about 1.5 years, his leukemia returned. We decided at that time that based on everything the oncologists were telling us and not telling us, it would probably be best for our son to not continue chemotherapy at that time. And so we decided to not do any further treatment. Cancer treatment for the blood cancers in 1985 were still in many ways in their infancy. And so the potentials of doing a bone marrow transplant or other more aggressive forms of chemotherapy had not been introduced at that time. And so we were doing the best that we could with what we had at that time. It was a very difficult time for us because we had really hoped that the remission would stay. But after he went out, after the remission relapsed about, he was only in relapse for about 2 months. And on the beginning of the 3rd month is when he finally lost his battle with leukemia. He was just not quite age 3.5 at that time.
But we were a young 28, each of us.
Yeah.
And we'd had no preparation for this kind of a life-altering event. And no particular role models in our lives that said, oh, this is how you grieve well. We didn't have, we had a very small handful of friends who knew how to interact with us. Typically, the church community that we were a part of did not have a clue as to what to do.
And we don't say that in a critical way, because
No.
had the tables been turned and somebody else in our community had a child with leukemia who had died, we would have been as equally ignorant as to know how to reach out and support that family.
But at the time, I did make a mental commitment to myself. If there was any way that I could help others learn what it would be like to really know what you're doing, to come alongside and help a grieving friend or family member, I would be willing to do that. And naturally, if there was anything I could do to help and support other grievers, I would be willing to do that. But that did not happen as an immediate result. In the 80s. We had a little 1.5-year-old daughter at the time. Her big brother died. 7 years later, we adopted a little boy from Moscow, Russia. We took on an adventure in our own careers and combined, taught about 40 years in the classroom, and loved that work. But as we launched our adult kids, the Lord really laid on my heart the need to pick things back up. And so we republished the book. That's the one that you just showed everybody. And I started this work kind of on my own while Steve was employed elsewhere. And then 4 years ago, he joined me. And so together we do this as a team.
Wonderful.
And so when I say we do this, I'm wondering maybe somebody might want to know, what is it that you do? So we consider ourselves grief educators and grief coaches. So we see private clients either in our office or via Zoom if they're in other places in the United States or around the world.
We have talked to people in Norway. We've talked to people in China. We've talked to people down in the Caribbean.
And Canada.
So with technology, it's a wonderful thing that allows us to be able to reach out. We love doing, we tell people we love and hate the work that we do. Because we realize that anytime we interact with a family, it's because they have lost a loved one.
And their hearts are broken.
What we love is the fact is, then we tell people we do the work that we do, not because our son Dawson died. Obviously, our work grew out of that, but our moving force is the fact that God is faithful to heal. And either God's word is faithful, as he says in his word, he's the God of all comfort. I will heal you from all your diseases. Well, diseases aren't just limited to physical disease, but also to our mental, emotional problems. God is capable of handling those, and he will deal with it in ways that will work uniquely with every person who interacts with their grief, and includes God as part of that picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let me ask you several questions to come, but you mentioned God. I believe most of us in the US, on the West, we are Christians. We believe in God, and I think that helps. What about, have you worked with atheists or people, Muslims or other, is there a process to help them?
Good question.
I like the question. I'm going to back up to answer it in that I think you're well acquainted with, particularly with the speakers you've had on this video show, how important physical health principles are to people's physical health, regardless of, what their persuasions are and any other line of thought. There are equally definite principles for healing broken hearts in a healthy way that would be applicable to all people, whether they're a person of faith or not.
Well, just to add, I mean, the biblical principles of healing can run across the board. I mean, there's plenty of principles that we utilize within the Christian world that come from a worldview. Just as many times within the medical field, there's medical practices that are from people that have no particular God paradigm, but their procedures and practices are very effective. So yes, we work with people who don't have a quotes God paradigm, or maybe a Christian paradigm. But at the same time, we share with them that the principles that we work with are universal in their appeal. I mean,
And applications.
Yeah, there's many things that the world utilizes. We would say the unchristian world, the non-Christian world, utilizes many things from the Bible context in terms of morality and those things that will go clear across the board. So the same thing can go for healing in the grief context.
Okay. So I would like to, I see that we have two other persons in the video. So I don't have their names, but feel free to, if you want to put your video, or if you want to you have comments or questions as we continue to talk with Steve. Today, everybody has the opportunity to talk. So please, our two friends, feel free to be part of the conversation.
Gerardo, do you
yes.
want to ask them if they want to find that little hand icon? So
Yeah.
when they have a comment or they'd like to
Sure.
add to the conversation, we would love to be able to recognize them.
Yeah, so if you go to the bottom of the page, you will see reactions there. There is an icon with reactions, and then you can raise your hand there. And so we can see if you have any question or comment, feel free, friends, to be part of this conversation. I believe, go ahead.
The other thing too at the bottom is on the left side of your screen next to where it says participants, you'll see a little balloon that says chat. You're welcome to type. Many times we have people who'll simply just type their questions or observations in on the chat, and then you can share that with us too, Gerardo. And you know.
Yes,
that
yes.
already,
So friends, feel free to either way to share with us. So do you guys go, I hope you don't mind me asking, when you were 20 years old, do you guys go through a depression period, or were you able to comfort each other, or?
Oh. So grieving as a young couple, that was a challenging thing. It was also something that we locked arms and said we were not going to let the pain in our heart come between us.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of questions and misunderstandings we had at that time that today we know differently.
Yeah. You know, there's been a lot of almost old wives' tales about couples and divorce of children who die. We call it that because as we've done studies into that more and more, there's been people just kind of just throw out a figure, 75% of couples who lose a child end up divorcing. Well, there is some truth to the fact that the numbers of couples who lose a child have a higher degree of divorce than, say, a couple who doesn't. But in researching it into it deeper, though, we find that many of those couples that went ahead and divorced because of the death of their child were already in marital crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just simply the tipping point that pushed them over the edge. It wasn't innately the death of the child, that they had a great marriage, they were wonderfully happy, the child dies, and now they get a divorce. That's generally not the scenario that psychologists today will bear out. They will say that majority of those couples, I'm not going to give you a number because I don't know the exact number, but the majority of those couples that divorce already were dealing with comorbidities in their marriage, as it were.
And I also want to really clarify that while we are a couple whose son has died, we step into the place of people's pain all over the spectrum. So before I broaden that, I'd love to hear from Julia and our iPhone guest. Why are you here tonight? Are you here looking for something that would be for your own broken heart, or because you want to know how to support someone else that's close to you? So if you could either pop in and tell us with your voice, or give us a chat response, I think that would be really helpful for us to gear what we can say that would meet your needs.
Can you hear me? I unmuted myself.
We can hear you. We can hear you this end. I don't know about Gerardo, but.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Julia. And I lost my husband recently,
Mm.
but I have a dear little girlfriend that lost her husband 2 days after I did. And we were super close friends. So I lost a dear friend and a husband at the same time.
Oh, Julia, that is
Hard.
such a hard thing. And to be able to be friends together with this same kind of pain and loss, how is it working for your friendship?
Really good, actually. We lean on one another. We're both devoted Christians. We read God's word and we pray together and we minister to one another.
Oh, that is so good to
That's good to know.
know.
Really, really blessed. I have a huge support community, if you will. And I know I'm blessed. And I know the Lord has a plan.
He has a plan to heal our broken hearts. When I, as a young 28-year-old mom, stumbled across the Psalm 147 verse 3, where it says, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds.
Mhm.
I either had to choose to say, this is a real reflection of the heart of God towards us, or it's just fancy poetry. And I'm a living witness today that he does heal our broken hearts and he does bind up our wounds. And there are really established principles by which we can choose to engage in with our grief and have the higher hope of a better outcome.
And we look at Genesis 3, Julia, and we realize that God originally created everything very good as we go through Genesis 1, 2, and 3. And then we realize 1 and 2. And then in Genesis 3, we find out that things aren't so good. And ultimately, we have death entering into the picture out of a perfect environment. So we know that God had never planned for that to happen. But his plan was from the very beginning to be able to restore us back to the original plan that he had, which was for us to live in complete peace and harmony. We're not living in that existence right now, are we? But his plan is perfect in terms of restoring us in this world, even in the midst of all the, as Gerardo was saying, we've got death and mayhem happening worldwide. How do we maintain some sense of calm and rationality and hope amidst all this? And I believe that, again, God's word, and as we look at people who have made it through tremendous loss and suffering, there are certain principles and characteristics that they have exhibited that has allowed them and aided them in making it through some of those saddest times. Do I add to that?
No,
Yeah.
just I want to hear from our other listener. I just see iPhone there. If they're willing to tell us why they've come on to this class tonight.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. Well, my daughter lost her grandpa about 4 to 5 years ago, and she's in therapy now, thankfully, but every now and again, she will come up to me just crying, like, I really miss my grandpa. And I tell her, hey, it's okay. You can feel all these emotions. It's perfectly fine. Your feelings are valid. But it's just, no matter how much time goes by, it's still hard for her. Obviously, that's the whole grieving process. And I tell her, you may, it never gets easier, just time goes on.
Well, I'm really intrigued with what you've just said. Could you share your name?
Oh, my name is Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you. Jennifer, you bring up a comment that many people will say that might be better understood if we take a look at it. Is there any amount of time that will clean your messy garage?
No, and that's why I tell her, hey, it's okay to feel these emotions. Like, I'm happy that she comes to me instead of just like keeping it on the inside.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
it's better to get all these emotions out, all your thought process. I tell her all the time, let me be
Yeah.
your safe spot, your space, your safe zone.
Yes, I love safe zones. Safe zones with caring parents and at home are wonderful for kids. Here's what we have learned, that that little saying that says, time heals all wounds, is really a myth. If we take a look at our refrigerators, and sometimes food gets pushed to the back of the refrigerator and we forget it's there, and we put new food in front of it, and we're coming and going, our lives are busy, and we have no idea how long the time has passed. But one day we open the refrigerator and this wall of smell just hits us hard in the face, and something's in the refrigerator that stinks. And if any of you are like I am, I might not have the time right that minute to dig into the refrigerator and take care of it. So I get what I need and I close the door. And again, the same question, is there any amount of time that's going to take care of the rotten food in the refrigerator? No. So time is not going to make the refrigerator stinky food get better. And if we don't do anything with it, yes, it will be there for the rest of our lives. But here's the amazing thing, is that it takes time to attend to what is in the refrigerator that's stinky. Or it takes time to clean the garage. But time is not what cleans the garage. Time is not what takes care of the refrigerator. It's our involvement. And so you're right, Jennifer, when you encourage your daughter to have her feelings and to express them and to miss her grandpa. And so you can keep supporting her with probably one of the best important principles of healthy grief. And that is to accept that grief is the process we take to heal. And pain has a purpose in that process. So let me ask you, Gerardo, do you know people who would avoid pain at all cost?
Well, we have people, I'm a dentist, people come only when they have the abscess or the face is swollen. So I guess hoping that it will go away.
Yes, yes. But now they have to come to you so you can professionally help extract what's that painful thing for them. But that pain that helped them get to you was actually a good thing. Why was it a good thing?
Because they knew something was wrong.
That's right.
Exactly. So when we are feeling the pain, the agony, the hurt, that's a good thing. It's signaling to us that something has gone wrong and we need to attend to it.
You know, it comes, I reflecting on what Jennifer is sharing about her daughter. I went through a divorce 11 years ago. It was a painful process. And when I was talking with the therapist, he was telling me, like any loss, but that was a big loss for me. And I was thinking that if people say, well, it might be 6 months or 2 years. And I was thinking, well, I cannot have this amount of pain for 6 months or 2 years because I will probably die. So I think that the pain starts to be less. In that sense, that I think that maybe, I'm not sure if Jennifer is agreeing, but we know that with time, it gives hope to know that with time, the pain usually will get better. If we do some kind of job, or, that's like I went to a therapist and her daughter is going to therapist as well. It's a comfort to know that with time, the pain will be, so it's not like from one day to the next, you suddenly, oh, okay, I accepted, the loss, whichever loss. But in that sense, it doesn't make sense. What is usually if you do your part, I like what you said, that's the example of cleaning the garage or the refrigerator. there is something that we can do. But it's good to have the knowing that the pain won't always be the same.
Pain is not
Because
always
it
the
can be
same.
overwhelming. I mean, it's like, I cannot have this much pain for 6 months or 2 years because it's like, I might as well die. It's just too much to handle.
Right, that's exactly right. The interesting thing is, while there is a alteration of the pain, if we don't engage with it, if we don't seek help like a therapist or read books or do our own self-care, like taking care of our bodies and releasing the pain through exercise or through journaling or through talking with a therapist, those are all healthy grief choices we can make. But there are plenty of people that live on this planet who don't do any of those things. And so the way they deal with their pain is to medicate it or to drug it or mask it
or
distract it, do a whole bunch of other kinds of things. And that means that that stinky food is still in the back of that refrigerator. It's like putting an alcohol spray or something in the fridge, thinking that that will make the smell go away, when really we need to address what the pain is giving us an alarm for.
I believe Jennifer wrote here, the fridge gets easier to clean after acknowledging the mess.
Yes.
So so we have either ourselves or we have had friends that have had the loss. Usually we think death, but it could be against a divorce, you lose a job or a relationship, if you're dating. So what are the symptoms that or the signs that we can say, it has been something is bothering me? What do you guys see that is the most common feature? What comes to mind is depression, but are there other things that will be concerning if we see a loved one that it seems not to be getting over? What are the signs?
Good
Well,
question.
I
Very good
like that question. And one of the signs that's an alarm or alert that someone's grief, be it our own or someone else's grief, is not healthy, is that we move into isolation. And sometimes that isolation might not be as apparent because we might send our body on ahead to something, but we're disengaged and we remain withdrawn and isolated inside. So isolation is definitely a sign.
Yeah, you also will notice we've had friends that we notice they become a little more disheveled. They're not attending to their personal needs physically. They aren't taking showers. They're not paying bills. They're not taking care of their cars. Their homes are becoming, the yards they're just checking out because the pain is greater than their need to want to take care of themselves or take care of their physical surroundings.
Yeah, and they just are unaware that they have another option, because who has been our role model for healthy, healing grief?
Yeah,
most of us don't have someone.
Or not, at least myself, it's difficult to make those visits. Somebody who is really sad, you don't know what to say, so you might as well pray and don't go there. And so I don't think we have a lot of interaction. And by the way, I have a new person is now with us, is Frank Artavia. He's a missionary dentist in Bangladesh. So we have an international viewer now.
Hello, Frank.
So Frank, feel free if at any time you want to text a question or share any thoughts. We are making kind of a conversation today.
Perfect.
Now, let me ask you, we are Christian, like most of us. Does that, it can play a very good role in the sense that give us hope, and we have promises, and we know this world is not all we have. And so I think it's awesome. But do we also are hardened on ourselves and say, oh, I'm still sad, so maybe I'm not a good Christian, I don't have enough faith? Are we too hard on ourselves as Christians, or?
Well, Gerardo, you bring up a really good point. We grieve emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Our whole being is going to be impacted by the loss. Julia is experiencing this. She's now currently in a supportive spiritual environment, but if she was not, she could be facing a crisis of her faith and the doubts and the questions. And that was our experience because we prayed earnestly for God to bring healing to our son's body. And what did we do with that when he fell asleep in Jesus, stopped breathing, and was no longer a part of our family? So we were forced face on with our big questions about God. And that's probably one of the things we enjoy a lot is being able to encourage people to ask those hard questions about God and to work through and let God reveal his goodness to them.
One of the things we find, you asked a question, another symptom would be to be stuck in maybe one of the areas of grief. We don't call it the stages of grief. People talk about the 5 stages of grief. We have found that does not work for people that are here in this broadcast tonight, because we're all alive. But if, Gerardo, I came to you as an oncologist, and I said, Gerardo, we did the test and you have cancer, and it looks like you have a glioblastoma, you will probably die within the next 18 months. You, as a person who's been given a terminal diagnosis, would go through those 5 stages of grief. You would have shock, you'd have denial, you'd have anger, you'd have bargaining, and then you would have resolution as the basic 5. And you would come to resolution, and then if the doctors were correct, within 6 to 18 months, you would die. But your family who's left behind, your wife, your children, your mom and dad or brother and sisters, they in turn are going to experience those emotions of shock, bargaining, don't let dad die, don't let my husband die, anger, well, God, why did you let this happen? Or why did you go and die on me? We many times are angry at the person who died. But that's not something that we go, oh, I was angry and I checked that off. Maybe a week or 2 weeks or 2 months later, I come back and I'm angry all over again, or I'm in shock all over again, or we're not so much in denial. We're generally not too much in denial, but we are very much in those other bargaining stages or whatever. So it's more cyclical, and it keeps bringing itself back up if we don't engage. For myself, I found that anger was where I was stuck at for a long, long time. And I was angry at my son for dying, and that sounds a little ridiculous. How can you be angry at a child who has cancer? But it messes, those that are here that have lost a loved one know that it messes your life up.
The pain is so horrific.
And so you look, and as irrational as it sounds, many people are angry at their loved ones who died through no fault of their own. Other times we're angry at them because they did not take care of themselves and then they died. Maybe they were a heavy drinker, a drug user, or they were grotesquely obese, or they ate or drugged or drank themselves to death. And now we're very angry at them. So those are all things that we look at and go, oh, I'm not dealing with it really, really well. Do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Gerardo, have there been any other comments?
I haven't seen any yet, but friends, feel free to, I continue to ask questions. I'm curious, I have questions, but everybody is welcome to either send a question or raise your hand. And so we'll give you the opportunity to share. So we have male, females, and children. Are we also, I was thinking about the Christian, if we are too hard on ourselves. When my mother-in-law passed away, I was crying as much as Janina, who was my wife. And as if somebody, a male, told me, well, you have to be strong. Don't cry that much.
Oh,
obviously you have to be strong for her. You know, you have to support her because it's her mother, it's not your mother. But you know, so do we put, Steve, if you don't mind me asking, do we put too much pressure, we men, in this kind of macho kind of, especially, you know, I see that, I don't know how tall you are.
I'm a big guy.
Okay, so for a big guy, do we expect them to have a hard heart and cry less, or how does it work?
Good question. The men who taught me to cry in my adult years, one was 6'5" and almost 280 pounds.
Okay.
The other one was 6'4" and probably 245 pounds. And they were fishermen and hunters and pilots, and they were a man's men, and yet they were not afraid to shed tears when something sad happened. It was news to me because I was raised in a family of men who never cried, or at least I never saw them cry. The motivational speaker Zig Ziglar put it very, very succinctly years ago. He goes, at times of grief and stress, this is not the time to be strong. This is the time to be human.
Mm-hmm.
And so God put tear ducts in both men and women's eyeballs, not just women's, but in men's. So are they there? Were they just like an appendix? You know, are they there some kind of weird thing that we're not supposed to use anymore? Or is there some purpose to our tears? I believe it's really important if our children, you were talking about children, if they don't see dad cry, what's a young boy, what's he seeing modeled? Oh, when it's really painful and really hard, men don't show emotion. So they must suck it up, or they go, you know, or we tell a child, you know, go to your room if you're going to cry. Oh, so it must be a private thing. We isolate. So the new way of us talking with men is that men need to be able to be given permission to weep and cry as they see fit in front of their wife and children. And it will be a great relief to them to see their dad cry, or grandpa cry, or their brother, or their work associate. To see a man's eyes glistening or a tear streaking down his cheek. I have never, ever thought less of a man who has cried. I never said, oh, what a wuss, what a panty waist this guy is. I have high respect because he's willing to show what he's feeling deeply inside. And so if men can realize that tearing up is a way of showing that they feel deeply, we may not always be able to verbalize it, but a tear is perfectly okay. Now, having said that, if a man is not able to cry or doesn't cry, does not, on the other hand, mean that he's not feeling deep grief. It just means that's not a way he's able to express it at that time. But given enough time, that man will shed tears. We're working with a gentleman right now who has not cried over the death of his son until just a couple of days ago. And it's been many, many months since his son died. So the right situation, if he's given permission to do so, should be able to cry. Do you want to talk about tears for a quick moment?
Well,
Karen?
I will, but I want to just give validation to what Julia chatted in the box there, that Jesus wept. He's a man. And so she definitely, it's a no-brainer. It's a pretty obvious example that Jesus gave for men. And I think before we go any further, that we really need to pause and ask ourselves the questions. How much of our culture, whether it's the Western culture, or whether it's an ethnic culture, or whether it is a national culture, how much of, or an academic culture or professional culture, how much of the cultures that are around us influence us about grief? And of that influence, how much of that influence is in alignment with what would be the best practices for our grief? And this whole conversation about tears is one example of how the culture informs us that we shouldn't cry and that tears are shameful and they're less manly. But the culture is wrong. Do you see? So if the culture is wrong there, is it wrong in other places as well? And we find that it is less effective in many other places for our grief.
Yeah. Well, and if I can interject there too, one of the hardest places to shed tears is at church in a faith group experience. And that's another culture that tells us something that maybe we shouldn't be listening to. As Christians or people that have a faith structure, we know that this life is not the only life or existence that we're going to experience. There is a better world to come. There is going to be ultimately an end to pain and suffering. But has that day come yet? No. So we're between the right now and not yet. It hasn't happened, the not yet and the actual happening. So what do we do with our emotions in the in-between time? Well, the Bible doesn't tell us not to grieve. It simply tells us to what? Don't grieve as those who have what?
No hope.
No hope. But it does tell us to grieve. And as Julia aptly said, Jesus wept. Now he was going to raise Lazarus back to life right after that was recorded, but he was still weeping for a lot of things, the unbelief and for his friend's sadness, and all the pain in the world that was wrapped up in that moment. But many times we will tell people, well, you know what, you surely shouldn't cry because we believe that Jesus is coming soon. And that is a true statement. But it's also not unlike, and Jesus will come and he'll wipe away all tears. And I love that Revelation, 21:4, says, and he will wipe away all tears himself. But in essence, what we're saying is imagine someone sitting on a red hot stove and it's creating an incredible amount of pain. And I go to that person, I go, someday God's going to come and turn that stove off. Really? Oh, that's good. Is that good news? Maybe in that nanosecond, but he still or she is still in an amazing amount of pain. And the thought, do I have to hurt this bad until Jesus comes? And that's where our work comes in. We say, no, we don't have to hurt and be hopeless and in despair until Jesus comes. Will we still weep and grieve the loss of our loved one until Jesus comes? Yes, we will, because that's put in our heart to do so. But we don't have to do it in a hopeless or despairing way. And that's what we show the world and people who don't know about maybe Christianity, is that we have feelings and we feel badly when someone dies. We should. And that's why we tell people in the Old Testament, we see God being angry, it looks like. Well, yeah, he's being angry at things that are like, should make us angry too. And so it's normal. Death is not normal. But our reaction and our grieving to it is still a normal thing.
I like to hear my good friend Wade, who is controlling the other computer and helping us with the transmission. He posted 1 Samuel 34. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep.
Oh.
So that's a thank you, Wade, for placing this verse. So though we have no limit in the time, usually we try to kind of make the meeting around 45 minutes to an hour. So this topic is endless, and I really appreciate, Karen, your idea of having this conversation. It's a wonderful idea. So we have, all of us, probably we may be grieving big things or small things, or we will grieve in the future, or we may know somebody. We have Julia and Jennifer. They shared what is going on with themselves and relatives. So in the next maybe 10 or 15 minutes, what are the things, the tools that it will be good for us to know that we can use and keep for us and to share with others? What are maybe the don'ts? We can have maybe some don'ts and maybe some do.
Let's do some do's.
Some good tools to grieve or to help us.
Let's do some do's. Okay. So the very first do that I want to recommend to everybody is expose yourself to as many excellent resources as possible. And I will be as bold to say that our website, comfortfortheday.com, and if someone wants to type that in the chat, Or were you going to share that later?
Yeah, we'll share it
Gerardo?
later. Yeah, we'll share it later on your email as
Yeah,
well.
we really, really want people to be able to access comfortfortheday.com. There are so many resources there for people to help along the way. So it's also on Facebook, Comfort for the Day. And so there are places where you can go to be encouraged, to be educated, to be supported, to find a community. There's just, it's good stuff. The other do's, let's make a little quick list of what to do. The very first thing we can do is begin to take excellent care of our bodies. Now, you've had fabulous speakers who've already spoken about that, but how does that relate to grief? Well, our bodies experience the stress of grief. So that our immune system is reduced for up to 12 months. We have mental fog. We're not clear. Our vision is affected. Our taste buds go like just dull. Food doesn't taste good. Our digestive system will be all in an uproar. We'll feel heavy chest pain on our chest. Our muscles will be achy and we'll have fatigue. These are all physiological responses to the stress of grief. This is a huge slam psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. So we might not be able to control a tsunami wave of emotions. But what we can do is we can say, I will get up this morning and take a walk. That is, I can do that. That's a can do. I will make sure I'm hydrated enough. I can do that. I was coaching a woman early on in the pandemic. Her brother had died. Had been a lot of trauma around his death and his funeral. She was back home. And I just happened to ask the question, how was she doing with her water intake? And she said, oh, I don't drink any water. I said, so what do you drink? She goes, oh, I have a few cups of coffee in the morning. And so her can do in between our coaching sessions, I said, I want you to line up 5 glasses of water. Now we know she needed way more than that, but if she could do 5, that would be great. 5 glasses of water, drink them all within one day before you go to bed. So a week later, when we had our telephone session, I asked her about the water. She goes, oh, I drink 5 glasses of water every day and I feel so much better. I can actually get out of bed. I went to my yard this week and she couldn't say enough good about what just 5 glasses of water did for her physiology of her grieving body. So those are can do's. Take care of our bodies. The other can do, it has to do with knowing that the grief experience needs to be released. I say it this way, we are not grief containers. We're not grief jars, like all this grief just gets poured inside of us and the lid gets put on. No, one of the goals we have as healthy grievers is to find appropriate ways to release that grief. Now, is our heart hurting? Are we like just shard glass from the inside out? Yeah, we are. And the saying is that hurting people hurt people. And so that could happen in a marriage relationship. It could happen between, parents and their children. They could hurt each other, or children towards their parents. We could get cross and angry and gnarly at somebody at work.
Or at church.
Or at church, right? So we want to be able to release those effects of grief in a healthy way. And so one of the best ways to do that is to put it on paper. We call it pie stopping. We ask people to stop writing, stop journaling, because that has to do with some structure. It has to do with academics. It has to do with the sense of correct, grammar and sentence structure and spelling, and that's not therapeutic. So releasing our emotions on paper therapeutically means that we PYSOP. And PYSOP simply just means put your stuff on paper, PYSOP. Put your stuff on paper. Let it be disorganized and messy and random, just like the grief is. And we'll get much more out of that experience. And we'll have much more release from doing that. Another can-do release is to exercise. Oh man, that is such a important way of releasing the cortisol buildup that's inside our system and the negative emotions. So to release. What do you think about that, Frank or Julia? Does that sound like a doability with when you've got a broken heart?
Yeah, this is Julia. I kind of started a little routine to work out. I started walking.
Good for you.
I'd actually quit my job about 8 years ago when my husband started getting sick. I was his caregiver, if you will, for the past 8 years. And so after he passed, and after all the services and everything calms down a little bit, I was waking up every morning feeling a little lost. I didn't know what to do. And so I started exercising. I'm up to a 3-mile walk. I do my devotionals. And I thought about journaling, and I keep saying I'm going to journal. But I like what you just said about journaling, because it is a lot of, I think you have a tendency, at least I do have a lot of tendency to think more about the pronunciation, the writing, all the proper grammar, etc., versus really just writing down.
Just put it out there.
Just spill it out on paper, however disorganized. I'm glad you like that, Julia. And I really want to encourage you to start practicing that. And in fact, in our book that Gerardo showed earlier tonight, it has pages for you to be able to do that. Can you open the book, Gerardo, so they can see?
Yes.
Yeah, it has those lined pages, the most important pages in the book, because that's where your healing takes place. That's where you get to put your stuff on paper.
See, it's your healing story, not Steve and Karen's.
It's not our story.
We don't share much of our story. We mentioned our son a little bit in the book, but it's really your story. That way, as you go back and look at all those entries that you've put in there, you go, wow, I've come a long ways. Now, there may be some things, Julia, as you write, or Frank, or whoever's looking at this later on, there may be some things that you share that are very, very personal, and you don't want to put it in even in the book. You write that on a piece of paper and then destroy it. The issue is not necessarily always keeping what you've written. And in some cases, you may not even be able to read what you've written because it's so sloppy. You're just writing as it comes to your mind because your emotions are coming out on paper. There's nothing that says you have to keep that paper. You can throw it away, you can rip it, you can shred it,
burn it,
whatever you want to do.
But the point is that it's
out.
You've released it. You've not held on to it. It's not become that stinky food in the back of the refrigerator.
Yeah.
It's been taken care of.
Really quick, we mentioned it before, and I'll just really briefly talk about the tears, about releasing. And we were talking about men and tears. What they have done, just real briefly, is they did studies. We had guys in the lab that looked at tears, different types of human tears under a high-powered microscope. Tears of pain, tears of joy, tears of laughter,
and tears of grief.
And then tears of grief. And the tears of grief, and you look at them in the picture, and they all look different. They all have a chemical makeup that's different
composition.
But the tears of grief actually contain toxins. So as we weep, we are actually releasing toxins, the cortisol, the things that build up in our body are actually being released through our tears. So there is really some benefits to weeping. Crying can make us feel tired afterwards, yes, but there's also a great sense of relief. And I'm glad I've got that out.
Yeah.
And
Weeping may last for a night, but joy comes in the morning.
Yeah.
And if we don't release what needed to come out, that joy doesn't come in the morning. You can't occupy two things in the same space. So one leaves so the other can
Mhm.
fulfill.
Another thing that you can do too, a positive thing, is to find people around you who can just be with you, who don't have a whole lot of advice. The people that say, oh, I know exactly how you feel, they're not people that you'll find real helpful, because they probably don't, because it's not their loss. But if you can find people that say, could I just come over and maybe have lunch with you? I'll bring lunch with me, or I'll take you out to lunch. And they don't talk a lot, and they don't demand that you say much. They're just there with you in your pain. In the law enforcement and fighter area, they call it the power or the presence, power of presence.
Power of presence.
Just show up and be there. Rather than just taking a dinner and dropping it off and running, take it and say, hey, can I eat this with you? And give that person the privilege of saying yes or no. We don't want to force ourselves on them, but surrounding yourself with people who get it. They're going to be the ones that you will love and appreciate in the years to come.
So I'm going to need to excuse myself.
Sure.
And let Steve finish up. And before I do, though, I just want to tell you it's been a delight to be here with you.
Likewise.
And I hope that we might be able to do this again. It's been a great conversation, but I'm going to let Steve wrap things up, and we'll look forward to the next time.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Karen. And yes, I think we are probably coming to an end. I don't know, Steve, any other recommendations, suggestions, or thoughts before we close, and then we'll share the information for your website.
Yeah, the website is a good place to look at it, Gerardo. The other thing too is to, as Karen said, just go online and look for grief resources. We love there's one of the most effective books that we have read that has helped us is called The Grief Recovery Method.
Mhm.
If someone wants to order that book, The Grief Recovery Method, you'll find that it is extremely helpful and practical in helping people. It's been so helpful in us in our work, but also helpful to us personally. The two authors are men that wrote the book, but tens of thousands of women have been benefited from reading this book. They have some insights into grief that I think are extremely useful, and they are writing it pretty much from it. They are Christian men, but they are not writing from necessarily Christian context even, but the principles go across the board. So I would really highly recommend that book too. Other than that, I think just staying aware of listening to our own hearts, our pain, and realizing that if we are in pain, just like when people come to you because they've got an abscess in their tooth, the pain is telling us to do something about it. And ignoring it, as you know, with a abscess tooth, it won't go away until that person is in incredible pain. And emotional pain can serve the same purpose of letting us know something's not right, but it needs to be attended to.
Yeah. Julia is asking, how can they get your book? I assume in your website?
Yes, Julia, on our website, just go to comfortfortheday.com, just all one word, and then just go to the store and you'll see our book there, and it'll say the book. And there's no shipping. We offer free shipping. If you're in California, we have to charge you a little bit of tax, but otherwise the book is right there. The book is available on other sites like Amazon or Barnes and Noble. The difference is our price is the same for our book. Our book, though, those books are what we call print-on-demand books. It's the identical same book, but it is of a much lesser quality. The books don't open as well. Our books are what we call offset press, offset printed. So they're of a higher quality paper, better ink, and the books lie open. So it's a little easier to write in and open them up. And so anyway, there's different places you get it, but comfortfortheday.com is the best place. We also have a grief coach video series. That was a good thing that came out of the pandemic. And we were able to put together, it was like having Karen and I as grief coaches come right into your own home. There's 25 sessions, or you can do a smaller one of 8 sessions. We've done one for Dr. Daniel Binus. There's 6 sessions on his website for Beautiful Minds. And these are video series that are less, once you have them, it pays for themselves very quickly compared to what you would pay for a therapist or a counselor that charge $200-300 an hour a visit. The cost of these are very minimal compared to that. And Grief, You Have Options is our video series that has been extremely effective for helping families. Once you have purchased the series, it's yours for as long as you want it. And it has downloadable PDFs that go with each and every segment. They're not real long because people in grief don't want to listen to a lot. We're not talking heads in there. Every segment is different. And we're told that it's been very, very effective for helping people have something to refer back to whenever they need it at whatever time of the day.
Fantastic. So, Steve, we are still connected with you, but let me ask Wade to share the screen. We'll go back to our presentation so people can see your website, and also we have the email for Karen.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll share that. We'll go to the next slide, and then we'll be closing this part in a second once we can get to there we go. So comfortfortheday.com, and then people can contact Karen at griefoptions.com. And again, Steve, it has been a really pleasure. This hour went flying. There are so many questions. This topic is endless, but we have put there in the chat also. Thank you, Steve, for placing that. Thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for making something good out of bad. And I know many people have been blessed. And we hope someday to have you again. And I hope someday to get to know you guys personally as well.
We would love to meet all of you, but in person. And we thank you for the opportunity to share. It's not a popular topic, but boy, it is one that we really want to be up and working well with when we need it, because death is going to come to all of us at some point, and we will lose a loved one, and it's good to know how to be able to interact with it in a healthy way. So we really appreciate the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Steve. So
thank you, Gerardo.
Friends, we want to invite you for our next meeting. Will be August 10th. And another topic that is not discussed much, intimacy and mental health. And if there is one person that can present this in a very scientific way, is Dr. Nedley. I have listened to him on this topic, and I want to invite you. Please invite your friends. Just as grief is an uncomfortable topic, the topic of intimacy, but there are so many things to learn that can enhance our marital life. And so we wait for all of you on August 10th. Please share the link. And let me close with a word of prayer. Actually, Steve, since you are still with us, if you'd
be happy
to share a prayer with us.
Thank you, Father God, for the opportunity to talk about something that you interacted with throughout your entire ministry, and you have throughout all of history. And that's the human condition of pain and suffering and sorrow and grief. The Bible tells us, Lord, that you are a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. So we know also that we're told in the book of Hebrews that you are a high priest who has experienced everything that we've experienced. So you, if anybody knows how we feel, it's you. And so we're thankful for that. I thank you for Gerardo and his desire to be able to share topics that are of a timely nature that people need to know about relationships and about grief and about healthcare and mental health care. Lord, we want to know how to be the best for ourselves and for our families and for our communities, and be able to instruct our communities how to be the best. So we just tonight are thankful that you understand our pain and our loss, and that it's your desire to come soon and put an end to all that is causing pain and sorrow. But in the meantime, may we do our best to be able to know how to assist others in helping them through the pain and the hurt they're experiencing from the loss of a loved one or from a variety of other losses, Lord, that causes deep pain and deep grief. And for that, we're thankful that we don't have to do it alone. You've promised to send your Spirit, and you've promised to send us others, humans that are capable of comforting us too. And for that, we're grateful. And so we pray that you'll just keep us close to you and open to what you'd have us to know in these areas, that we can be the healthiest for all those around us. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Thank you, friends, again for joining us. Thank you, Steve and Karen, once again. We
You are
wish
so
you
welcome.
a blessed rest of the week, and we hope to see all of you next month.
Thank you so much, Earl. Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.